Okay folks, in this video I'm going to show you guys how to create new files, open existing files, and how to save files. Okay, let's go ahead with creating new files. First thing you want to do is go up to File, and this is going to be the same for either Mac or PC. Go up to the menu bar, File, New, or you could hit the hotkeys Command N on a Mac, Control N on a PC. Click on New. You get this dialog box that pops up called New Document. Under that, you have a whole bunch of tabs here, with recent being probably the default. You also have saved, photo, print, and so on. Okay. Now, anytime you create a new document or new size of document, Photoshop will save a snapshot or um, yeah, sort of like a snapshot and list it here, just in case it's a particular size that you use a lot. Instead of having to enter the dimensions of the project every single time, you could just click on one of these um, snapshots, if you will. Now, you folks may have an additional dialog box up here. You could just close that out. From time to time, there'll be a little message up here, and then you'll see the snapshots below the message. Don't worry about the message, you can just close that out. So off to the right here, you have an area to title your project or your file. You can change it. Most of the time I'm lazy, so I just leave mine untitled 1. Then coming down here to the width, you can change the width by typing in a number. Height, type in a number. The inches here, you can change that to different formats: pixels, inches, centimeters, millimeters, points, or picas. We will stick with either inches or pixels. Okay, so let's switch to pixels. And to start off with, I have a MacBook Pro, so my screen resolution, I'm just going to go with 2880 and hit the tab button to get to height and go to 1800. Okay. Now, this area here is orientation, and you have two different types of orientation. Think of it like your cell phone. You have the portrait mode, which is straight up and down, or you have landscape mode, which is left to right, and that's usually the way you put your cell phone if you want to watch a video. Okay. So depending on the dimensions that you enter in here, will determine which orientation you have. You can manually change the orientation by clicking on the button here, clicking on each button. If you notice, watch the width and height as I click on the other button. They swap, right? So you can swap orientation either by typing in a number, this will automatically change, or you can click on this button to change the orientation. Don't worry about artboards, we won't be using this for Photoshop. The resolution, make sure this stays at 72 at all times. And I'll explain a little bit later why. And make sure pixels per inch is selected. You only got 2 pixels per inch, pixels per centimeter. Make sure it always stays pixels per inch and 72. RGB color. This drop down menu here has bitmap, grayscale, RGB, CMYK, lab. Make sure we stay with RGB. Don't worry about the 8-bit. White is the default background color. And Once you have all of this situated, you don't have to follow my example of the width and height. I'm just putting these numbers in because that's the size of my computer screen. Um, but you folks can put in something like 1280 by 720 or however much you want. You can also name your title if you want, and you could also save it if you want. If you click on this, you can. What it will do is it'll save all of your settings that you set up here, and you can title it whatever, and it'll save it under this tab here. So instead of coming to recent next time, you can just click on save, and it'll have a saved layout. Okay. So yeah, this is. I guess you would you would set this up here. Yeah. So you would redo all your settings here, then click save. I will give you one situation where this would work out perfectly. Is for you guys who have like an iPhone or whatever smartphone you have, you know the dimensions of your screen on your phone. So if you folks want to make your custom um, wallpapers for your cell phones, this would be a good opportunity to save a preset so that you don't have to keep creating or entering the dimensions of your cell phone wallpaper every time you want to create a new wallpaper. You have a saved setting. So that's when a saved option becomes useful, is when you want to use the same document over and or same size document over and over again. Okay, so it looks like I have to re-input my numbers here. Once again, you guys don't have to copy the same numbers. Okay, so 2880, 1872. Okay, it looks good. Oh, let me go to pixels. Oh, you notice what happened when I switch from inches to pixels is the numbers changed here. That's a good thing to show you folks. So you folks might have heard of, say, like your television, 1080p, 1080 HD, 4K TV, stuff like that. Well, the most common is 1080, right? 1080, 1080 HD, by, I believe it's 720 in height. Okay, so just to give you an idea of the pixels to inches ratio for a 1080 television, it should be larger than that. Probably the resolution is 72, that's why. In any case, if you notice, switch it between inches and pixels. So a 15 inch by 10 inch picture, if you switch it to pixels, you get a 1080 pixels by 720. So keep that in mind when you're creating your document there. Go ahead and hit create, and you have your document. So that's how you create documents, right? So you go file, new, you get your new document box, and once you start making documents, Photoshop will save a snapshot of your custom sized document every time you make a new document. So you can either click on that to select and hit create, or you can type in and create a totally new document. You can also save a preset document, and that'll show up under here. We won't be covering any of these other tabs. You folks can explore that on your own. In the next segment, I'm going to show you folks how to open up existing documents. Okay, folks, moving on, we will be covering how to open up Photoshop documents or any other type of image files in Photoshop. Okay, let's start off with Photoshop documents or PSDs. Okay, first method, you go up to the menu bar, click on File, Open, and for this demonstration purposes, I created a blank Photoshop document. You know it's a Photoshop document because the extension, the 3-letter extension on the end, is PSD, which stands for Photoshop document. Okay, select it, click open, and here we go. As I said before, it is a blank document. That's method 1. Let me go ahead and close out the PSD. Second method, you can double click on a Photoshop document or PSD to open it up in Photoshop if Photoshop is already open. So I'm going to go to my desktop right now, and here is my Photoshop document, PSD. I'm going to go ahead and double click on it, and it opens in Photoshop. Now if Photoshop is not open, let me go ahead and close up Photoshop. You can launch Photoshop by clicking on a PSD, a Photoshop document. So let me do that right now. So that's method number 2. Method number 3, you can drag and drop a Photoshop document into Photoshop if it's already open. So I'll drag it off of my desktop right into Photoshop and release, and that's the third method. So pretty simple, straightforward. And this is the same method you use whether you are on a Mac or a PC. Now you can also open up images in Photoshop. It doesn't have to be just a Photoshop document. Let me go ahead and close out my PSD there. So the first method, just like the method to open up images, is pretty much similar to opening up Photoshop documents. So regular images, you can go up to the menu bar up here, File, Open. And for this demonstration, I'll go to the Photoshop class files that we downloaded from Lalima, and I'm going to select DC and click open. And there you go, method 1. Another method to open up images in Photoshop is you can drag an image from wherever you have it on a computer, whether it be on a desktop or in a folder, and you will drag it into this gray I guess bar area or tab area. So let me demonstrate that now. Here I have my folder with the Photoshop class files. I'm going to pull the Poppy picture into Photoshop. So you just grab your picture and drag it and release it anywhere within this gray bar here. Okay, and release. And there you go. As you notice, Photoshop opened up a new tab for this picture. Every time you open up a new image and you drag and drop the image in this bar, let's just call it the image tab bar for now. Um, Photoshop will create a new tab every time you open up an image. Let's go with another image with Joshua Tree here and drag it and release it in this gray bar area. There you go. So every time you open up a new image, you get a new tab. You can rearrange the tabs if you want. Just left mouse click and drag. Okay. Sort of like how you rearrange tabs on the panels here. Same thing. And that's how you open files in Photoshop. Okay, in this final segment of the video, I will show you folks how to save files in Photoshop. Okay, let's go up to the File menu up here. Click on File, and if you take notice here, Save is grayed out. We only have Save As an option right now. Okay, the reason being is if you haven't done any edits to your document, meaning you haven't made any changes to your document, Save will stay grayed out or unavailable until Photoshop notices that you've made a change to your original document, or since you've opened your document, there has been a change. So let me show that to you right now. I'm just going to take my paintbrush here and draw a quick squiggly line with my paintbrush. Now obviously this is not how the document looked like when I first opened it, so a change has been made. Now if I go up to File, you notice that Save is available. Okay, and if I do click Save, Photoshop will write over or rewrite the file, meaning that I'll save over my original file. Now if you folks recall, my original file had nothing in the document. It was a blank document. Now it has this squiggly line. Now if you folks want to not save over a file, in other words, maybe have both versions, the original document and this newer version, you folks will want to use Save As instead, okay? Instead of Save. And I highly recommend that you folks always use Save As. I rarely, if any, use Save. The reason being is Save As allows you to save another version of your Photoshop document. And the reason you want to save multiple versions of your document is if you don't like anything or any of the edits or any changes you made to your most recent version of your file or your project, you can always go back to a previous version. If you choose the Save method, then you constantly rewrite over the existing document, and Photoshop doesn't save your history. So if I were to close up Photoshop after I saved this file, then there's no way to undo this squiggly line. Okay, in other words, I can't go back to the blank document that I used to have if I use just the normal save method. Okay, I can undo this while Photoshop is still open, even though I've saved it. But once I close Photoshop, I lose the history and I won't be able to go backwards. So I highly recommend that you folks always use save as instead of save. And when you do use save as, let me go ahead and click on save as right now. I highly recommend that you folks save multiple versions. So as you can see, the original title is um, untitled dash one. Okay. Now, if you're gonna save another version of the untitled dash one document, I would change the title to untitled dash one, and I'll go ahead and add an underscore, and then capital VER for version, and 2. Something simple like that. It doesn't have to be what I just wrote, but it should be something that lets you know that this is another version of the original. Okay, and then of course, the next time you work on your project, you'll launch version 2, and then you make changes to it. And when you save that document, you do a save as, then you'll save it as version 3, or however you decide to name your versions. Okay? And you folks should get into the habit of doing something like that. It's just extra layer of protection, I guess. I guess you could say. Um, it offers you a way of going sort of back in time, to an earlier version. If whatever you've worked up to this point you don't care for, so you can kind of like, it's a redo. Of course, you'll lose all the time that you put into the most recent version, but at least you don't have to restart your entire project. Okay, so I highly recommend you do save as. Now, the layout in my save as box is a little different than because I'm on a Mac, of course. For you PC guys, you guys' interface might be a little bit different, but you folks do share something similar to the Macs in that if you take a look at the bottom here, it says format. Okay. Now, format is the type of file you want Photoshop to save it as. The default is a Photoshop file, or PSD, right? P stands for photo, S for shop, and D for document. Okay? As you notice up here, right now it's PSD. Now if you click on the drop down menu here on format, you notice a large list of different formats you can save your file or project as. The most common is, of course, is Photoshop. For our class, our project, we will use 3 different formats. The first, of course, is Photoshop. The second is JPEG, right here. I'm sure you folks have seen JPEGs before. That's the most common type of image file on the internet. So if you click on JPEG, you notice that my extension, this is what it's called, an extension, right here, the last 3 letters, has changed to .jpg for JPEG. Okay? And if I go ahead and click save now, you notice I get a second dialog box that says JPEG options. Now for JPEG options, the only item you have to really worry about here in this box is the quality. 12 is just a numerical value that they assign to the highest level of quality for a JPEG. The lower the quality, the more pixelated or blurry the image will be. The higher the quality, the sharper the image will be. The only drawback is the higher the quality, the bigger the file. So this is a pretty small image anyway, so the file size is relatively small. But once you start dealing with larger images, this number here, this represents how large your file will be when you save it. This could get up into the megabytes level, I guess you could say. So, and this number corresponds to how high you set your quality level. So 12 is max. If you put something like 10, which is still is at the lower range of the maximum quality level, you could go to 8. You notice the quality here in this drop down menu changes to high. So by changing this number, you automatically change what level of quality here in the JPEG options. And of course, the lower you go here on this number, the lower this number becomes. In any case, I try to set or leave the setting at 12. You always want a sharp image, but you do have to pay attention to how big your file will become. And if you click OK, Photoshop will save the file to wherever you told it to save it in the first place. So let me go over that one more time. So if you want to save a JPEG of this image or this project, go to File, Save As. Tell Photoshop, first you can change the title of the JPEG. Tell Photoshop where, this is the area where you tell Photoshop where you want to save the file. Then finally here, Format, you want to change that from Photoshop to JPEG. And when you click Save, Photoshop will ask you what quality do you want to save. I usually set mine to 12 and I hit OK. Okay, I set the save area to my desktop. So if we go to the desktop, you'll see now that I have my JPEG saved on my desktop. Okay, so that's one method of or one of the extensions that we will be using. So Photoshop, JPEG, and the final extension or format we will be using is Photoshop PDF. Okay, basically it tells Photoshop to turn your project into a PDF, an Acrobat Reader file. Okay, that's what the PDF stands for. I won't get into the PDF settings right now. I just wanted to show you folks the 3 different formats that we will be using for our project. So for now, just worry about, or just concern yourself with saving Photoshop your project as a Photoshop document, a PSD. When it comes closer to the time that you folks are going to submit your projects to me, I'll go over in a separate video once more how to save a JPEG and how to submit a Photoshop document, or I'm sorry, Acrobat Reader PDF document. Okay, so that's it for saving documents in Photoshop. And one last thing before we end the video, I highly recommend that you folks save often. Okay, I can't overemphasize how important it is for you folks to consciously save your project, maybe about every 15 minutes or 20 minutes. So about every 15 to 20 minutes you want to go up to File and do a Save As and save a version of your project. The reason being is Photoshop is prone to crashing, and I can't tell you how many times um, I've had students, and myself as well, I'm guilty of it as well, putting in about 2 to 3 hours worth of work, forgetting about saving, and Photoshop crashing, and you lose all that time that you invested in your project. Probably because you were in the zone and you were enjoying yourself, and you just kept working at the project, and all of a sudden Photoshop either crashes or freezes, and you can't get that work back. So I highly recommend every 15 to 20 minutes, if you folks can get into that rhythm of saving, do a file, save as, and save a version of the project you are working on. It'll save you folks a lot of headaches down the road. And with that, that's the end of our video.